Exactly. Well said. Okay, so for those of you who were here yesterday, I think Rahul already introduced Gopal. But for those of you who weren't, let me say a few words about him. So Gopal, or our Gopalkrishnan, how many things is he? Doyen and mentor of corporate India. And we'll talk about his long stints with both Hindustan Unilever as well as Tata Sons. Celebrated author. This book that we're going to talk about today is book number 18 and counting, so prolific author as well. Inspirational speaker, but I think how he really likes to see himself is as a keen and astute observer of life and of human nature. And I think you're going to hear a lot of that as he speaks today. The book that we're talking about is called Inside the Boardroom. And I'm sure many of us wonder what happens behind those closed doors, right? I mean, most of us don't have access to this. You know, we're not privileged enough maybe to serve on boards in many cases. So there is a certain amount of curiosity there, I hope. But I was particularly intrigued by the subtitle, which says, How Behavior Trumps Rationality. And I think that's something that all of us can use in our lives. So hopefully we will take away something useful from that. I have an important question to ask about the title of this, which I'm going to come to in a minute. But before that, talking about you as a prolific author, these days we find that so many people from corporates and business people are writing books. Have you observed that? And do you have any accounting for it?
No, I think there are a lot of business people writing books, or many business people who have books written about. Okay? I'm not making a distinction between the two. In my observation, since my career is over 55 years, from the Prakash Tandons of the 60s, who wrote their book themselves about their journeys, you have come into three genres in this so-called business book writing. Business books sell very well, by the way. If you talk to publishers, they're always looking for new titles and new authors. The first genre is how I did it. And I'm not dismissing them, don't get me wrong. There are people who built great companies, who turned it around. Usually the picture of that particular hero appears on the cover, and often with good reason. The second genre is how I solved a particular problem. So how did I make my company more productive? How did I grow my company exceptionally well? So it's about a slice of their career. And the third part of it, which is just emerging and new. And if I don't sound boastful, in a sense, I have occupied that space. Because I said getting my mugshot on a book cover doesn't give me any particular joy, with no disrespect to those whose mugshots are on the book cover. But for me, my career of 55 years in the professional arena has been a journey of life. I could have been an army general, I could have been a poet, I could have been a market researcher. We all read life through the platforms which we occupy. And there are various circumstances that lead to that platform. So I started writing, and I make it sound very determined and conscious and logical, but believe me, in the interest of brevity, I'm summarizing it. A view of life, but set on the platform of business and enterprise, rather than about business and enterprise. And if you asked a defense forces person, he would write about leadership. He'll probably talk about battlefields and strategies. If you talk to a poet, that person may talk about the skies and the water. If you talk to an environmentalist, it'll be of the conversation type you just heard. So that's the my take on the kind of business books coming. Now recently, I'd just like to mention this. It's come out too late for Khushwant Singh Litfest to feature it. My very dear and esteemed colleague, the late Dr. Jamshed Irani, who used to be the managing director of Tata Steel, We were together as colleagues on the board of Tata Sons. He passed away, and I had been bulldozing him to talk about how he did various things that he did. And then he started dictating it, and while he was probably 3/4 of the way through, he passed away. And I think his wife is here somewhere. Daisy is here. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there are some tremendous people we have in our country, like we have in every field. And I just thought it would be appropriate to just celebrate that kind of person who, if I may say so, rebirthed Indian steel.
Now, that is an amazing endorsement, and I hope we hear more about this book. Niloofar, shall we consider that one for next year's Kasauli Litfest? Right. Okay, now to get back to this thing that's been intriguing me ever since I saw that in the program, this session is titled, Why Flies, Clubs, and Companies Go Round in Circles. Anyone want to make a guess what that might be about, or shall we let Gopal tell us the story?
Take 1 or 2 guesses.
Any guesses? Flies, clubs, companies. Nope, seems like they're stumped. So you tell us.
Well, I can add to that list, but the title would have become too long. Flies, companies, music sabhas, political parties, national governments, all of them, parliaments, almost any collective form of human endeavor. But let me tell you where that title occurred to me. As I said, I write about life. And people think of me as a management writer. That's fine. But I think I see human behavior and life through the field of management. In Bombay, those of us who live in Bombay know that in the monsoon, around June, July, till September, if you keep your windows open, you get flies coming in. And the sales of fly swatters increases for those 3 months. And I was, as a curious person, wondering why flies come in, and they always seem to go around in circles. Flies don't go straight to the point. They are not army generals, if you see what I mean. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to head. They just go around until they seem to alight on a pot of honey. I was then advised that if you want the flies to stop coming, I'm just making a little story because this is really what inspired me. They said, साहब, कहते हैं कि एक प्लास्टिक बैग लेके उसमें पानी भर देना और उसका गला में रबर बैंड लगा के आप विंडो पे लटका देना. So I said, now I'm an engineer, student of physics, IT. Why would a fly stop coming in if he saw one plastic bag? Luckily, my cook is not of Mensa, Phi Beta, Theta capacity. And he said, साहब बोलते हैं तो कोशिश तो करिए, आपको तो कुछ उसमें हर्ज नहीं है. So I did it. And the flies stopped coming. So if any of you have a problem with flies, here's an environmentally good solution, doffing my cap to the previous session. But then if the flies stopped coming, my cook said, मैं अगले बार जाऊंगा ना, मैं समस्तीपुर में मेरा गांव है, मैं यहाँ से 200 प्लास्टिक बैग खरीद के जाऊंगा. तो I said, क्यों? He said, गांव में किसी को इसका कुछ पता नहीं है. हम एक बैग यहाँ 5 रुपए में खरीदेंगे, वहाँ पे 50 रुपए में बेच देंगे. थोड़ा पैसा भी खर्चा का निकल जाएगा. I said, that's entrepreneurship. When I examined this subject from a scientific point of view, here's what I found. We human beings have 2 eyes. And these are called simple eyes. There's one eye here, one eye here. And they have the facility of moving up, down, left, right. So if I see a pot of honey there which I want, I can turn my head, I can move my eyes there, I just get up and go a straight line. Fly can't do that. Don't know if you're aware, but a fly has 4,000 eyes. 2,000 on this side and 2,000 on that side. And if you Google fly's eyes, which is a good pastime after the cricket match, you'll find pictures of these fly's eyes. They're very scary to look at. each eye is fixed. It can't see anything. It's like a crystal. So if a fly sees that there is this particular eye has seen that. Remember, a fly has 360-degree vision. Huh? They're fit to be prime ministers for that reason, because they have 360-degree vision. So if the fly sees there is a pot of honey there, he can't just get up and go there. So he gets up, and like an Air Force pilot or a commercial pilot would land his aircraft, it goes round and round, adjusting its body to a lowering and lowering radius until it lands on the pot of honey. The fly has multiple visions, and that impedes its movement in an efficient way. You and I can move to the pot of honey in an efficient way, but the fly moves there in an effective way, appropriate to its anatomy. And clubs, companies, music sabhas, all of them do exactly the same. People become presidents, secretaries. They have a great vision. They present their vision to their members. They get votes. But there are 4,000 other eyes. And the clubs go round and round. I've never met a club. I'm very fond of clubs because I'm fond of sports. And I just read the Financial Times front page big story article on Delhi Gymkhana. Some of you may be members of it. Front page. So, of course, the twist over there is they say Modi takes over Delhi Gymkhana, but leave that aside. So, and companies, I've also found when I work in my companies that boards also go around in circles. We criticize government for going around in circles, but I think it's an anatomical reality. I won't even call it a deficiency. And the reason I wrote that is, my first book in 2015 was called 6 Lenses. Why do two people who believe they are perfectly rational, is there anybody here who's irrational? Please put up your hand. And yet, you see the same object and have completely different perceptions of what that object is. And if those of you who remember Akio Kurosawa's movie from the 1950s, what is it called? Rashomon, have this wonderful, almost metaphysical development of how 4 people see the same murder and come to completely different conclusions on what happened. Yesterday when I was listening to one such case on the murder story, again Rashomon came back to me, and I said, there are different perceptions. So I wrote a book called 6 Lenses, in which I described which are the 6 lenses human beings use. And I followed that up with another book 3 years later called Crash. Why do people who are perfectly normal on their way up in their career become self-obsessed by the time when they reach the top? Oh, I used to know this guy. He used to study in school with me. Bada acha bhola aadmi tha. But suddenly he has become something else. So I wrote another book called Crash. And this is, in my mind, though it's not presented that way to the public, a sequel, the third book, which says how these two combine in boards to make very respectable looking, suited, booted, logical captains of industry behave irrationally. So in my mind, there's a journey.
That's really interesting. And it also, in a way, tells you, I hope, that even though the title is kind of daunting, right? Inside boardrooms, how many of us, hope we will ever serve on a board? Probably not. But I think it can come down to the level of your building society, managing committee. It can be, as you just said, clubs. It can be schools and universities. It could also be national governance. The same principles and the same behaviors and attitudes and biases prevail in all of them. So I think there is a lot to be learned and a lot of wonderful stories. And because I come to LitFest really to hear stories that have been written, stories about how stories were written, and Gopal's a great storyteller, I'm going to sort of ask him to talk about a few of those stories and see what lessons we can learn that some of them are in the book. Fair enough? Should we do that?
You've undertaken a very dangerous pathway, because you tell an author who's written 220 pages to tell a few stories, he may take the whole hour.
Okay.
Stop me if I don't.
I will do that. I will do that. Thank you for the permission. So,
you wanted me to say at least one story?
No, I'm going to ask you for a story.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So as I said, 2 big stints of Gopal's careers were Hindustan Unilever, and then Tata Sons. So I'm going to ask for a story from each of those places. I have a small overlap with Unilever, so I'm kind of particularly interested there. In 1988, I finished business school and I joined Lintas, the advertising agency. And for Lintas, Unilever was the single largest, most important client. And so we worked on many of their brands, one of which was Surf, the detergent. Right? And at that point in time, Surf was preeminent in the market. In fact, you would say, Zara adha kilo Surf dena. Whichever brand you wanted, you still called it Surf. It was the generic word for detergent. And it was coasting along really nicely until one day, this little upstart brand came along called Nirma and really gave Surf quite a challenge. Gopal, you were in Hindustan Lever at the time. I have a little bit of that advertising agency view of what happened. But I would love to know how a corporation like Hindustan Lever, how they made their own internal decision-making to address a challenge like that. Because today, Surf is still in the market as Surf Excel. Nirma isn't. So I'd love to hear that story.
I won't go to the whole story because I want to make it relevant to the subject we're discussing about how Hindustan Lever tried to solve a non-problem as they first thought, which then became a problem. Then they applied rationality to it, so failed, and then they put intuition into it, and it worked. Because that adduces to the title of the book. My first brush with this particular subject was when I was a young sales manager in Bombay. My boss called me and he said, I believe there is something called Nirma selling in Ahmedabad. This is 1972, 73. Will you go and do a study and come back? I did my study, I submitted my report, and I'm sure like me, many others would have submitted reports before or after. When this matter was discussed in, I'm using the word board meeting to mean top management meetings, so don't take it literally as a board. We said, oh, we sell our product at 20 rupees, he sells it at 6 rupees per kilo, so let's cut cost. So you started taking out things. They said, let's cut the packaging cost. So then you took out a few more things. But you, from 20, you could come to 18, but to get to 6. Oh, he's cheating. He doesn't give excise duty. Government is giving small-scale industry. What else is he doing which is cheat? These were the rational ways, root cause analysis, industrial engineering techniques applied to marketing. And then something very interesting happened. We have a practice, a tradition in Hindustan Lever, that the chairman says, I want to set an example. If there's a crisis, I must be in touch with the weakest people in the company. They don't use the word weakest, I'm using that word, most vulnerable people. And so he goes off 5-6 days in a year to different markets in the north, south, east, west. He talks to distributors and salesmen and, tela gadiwalas, and he doesn't permit the hierarchy to accompany him. So it is not like a minister arriving in Bombay where, in India, where the minister is on his way. On one such visit, somebody spilled the beans because the chairman would be inviting and saying, "To ye kyun ho raha hai? Kya ho raha hai?" And he came back and he said, I've been living in a fool's paradise. The greatness is that he was willing to admit it. It's very difficult for a leader to admit that he was living in a fool's paradise. I just joined the board. The year was 1987. And I was only 41. I said, I'm on the board of the company and you're likely to be a bit cocky about it. And I went for my first board meeting thinking that, matters of grave importance and the future of humanity were going to be discussed. And Ashok Ganguly was the name of the chairman. He said, I think we are in deep shit. And unless we wake up, we are going to be doomed. And this looks like an area manager's meeting with a salesman. But language helps. That's why I'm using the word behavior. And over a period of time, we did various things with intuition, saying, if that's the nature of the threat, our response, we put out guys who kicked them out of the head office, so they got no charges from the head office. We gave them the freedom to set up an alternate distribution system. We created a separate startup. 3 very talented people led it. They're all very senior people and quite well known now. And we launched a product called Wheel. And the first time, since you talked of your stint in advertising, Lintas, your former agency, came up with wheel advertising. It looked like a Jhatka Bollywood movie. And all of us said, tut, tut, tut. Unilever will never approve it. We are Hindustan Lever. Thoda saab like. Ultimately, Alec Padamsee came. He said, you must touch the sweat on every back that buys Nirma. Please run it. We said, run it. And today, Wheel is the largest brand in anywhere in Unilever in the world. It's taken 25 years. So I thought, that shows you how rationality is trumped by behavior.
Absolutely. And how... Hello? Can you hear me if I don't use the mic?
Here, take this.
Oh, I need the mic. Okay, there's one somewhere.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes, and finally, therefore, how decisions are made, and not necessarily based only on the numbers on the graph. So point well made. The next story I'd like you to ask you to tell us is from your Tata stint. So Tata is a very diversified business in a whole lot of fields. And then in 1996, they launched a retail jewelry store named Tanishq. Jewelry in India has always been sold traditionally, right? Your goldsmiths, your whatever. We've never had retail jewelry in India before. And Tata's as a company knows nothing about jewelry. So what was Tata's thinking of when they decided to launch Tanishq? How was that decision taken?
Round and round in circles. And we came to the right decision.
Right.
So we took the more effective decision. We took a decision in the more effective way rather than the more efficient way. So there was Xerxes sitting in Bangalore. Xerxes is a dilettante.
No, say who Xerxes was.
Xerxes Desai was a TAS officer who was at that time the managing director of Titan. And Oxford, Cambridge, sab pada hua hai, hamare jaise nahi tha. And he loved classical music, the classy guy. And he launched Titan watches that were successful. And then this idea came up in his team. I don't know who to attribute the idea to. Doesn't matter really. Jewelry mein jayenge. The board of the company, which has Tamil Nadu Industrial Development Corporation, it's a joint venture between Tamil Nadu Industrial Development Corporation and Tata's. They went into the jewelry business. And the first 4 years were disastrous. I was in the Tata Sons board, and periodically proposals will come to increase the capital, give them money. And I don't mind admitting, I'm at an age and a stage when you can think back dispassionately about errors of judgment you made. Thank God I was not allowed to run the boat, otherwise I would have sunk it. I said, that's pretty ridiculous. Tata knows nothing about jewelry, etc. But Titan said, allow us 2-3 years. We have a game plan. I'm not going into the game plan because that's getting into too much detail. The essence of the game plan was, we have to put a doubt into the mind of the consumer about the gold she's buying. Even my wife would say, I bought it from Totaram Papalal, and that's top-class jewelry. From my grandmother's time, we've been buying there. They created something called a carat meter. I don't know if some of you are Tanishq users, you would have seen it. You can put the gold under it, do something to it, mumbo jumbo. It gives you how many carats gold is it. Now that was something not very rational, if I may say so.
And pretty revolutionary.
And suddenly people said, yaar, mera Totaram Papalal, since my grandmother's time, has been jipping me. And people started coming to Tanishq gradually. And today, 80% of the company is Tanishq. Only 20% is the watches.
Wow.
It's highly profitable, and it's a standard case study in how to organize disorganized markets. And I want to mention just one more, if I may, because I'd like to defer to the previous participants who were here talking about climate and water. And I just want to mention that. I was the vice chairman of Tata Chemicals. Ratan Tata was the chairman. And so we used to sit next to each other. And a proposal came up to make that particular chemical that the company was making in a non-synthetic, natural way. See, traditionally, that chemical was made by pumping seawater, a lot of energy, and then you dry it and evaporate it and centrifuge it. And this one was energy free because nature created mountains. It's like salt, you know. And the government of Tanzania invited us to come and put up a mine and mine this particular, it's called soda ash, sodium carbonate for those who are chemistry interested, on the lake Natron in Tanzania. So we said, it's a chance of a lifetime because the cost of production would come down from $400 to about $250. And it's nature friendly because you don't have to consume so much energy. So there was a robust round of approval to go ahead. We did environmental impact study, feasibility study. I think we spent $10 million in all those studies. When we were at the peak of our excitement, we get a message saying, well-wisher of Tata, that please, for God's sake, don't put up a plant there because that is the natural resting site of the little flamingo. And we knowledgeable cognoscenti sitting around the table said, what is a bigger flamingo and what's a medium flamingo? All Googled to find out what a flamingo is in the first place. Since we knew not much more than how to Google for it, and $10 million had gone, and we'd have to write it off in 1 quarter, which means you'll report close to a loss or a collapse of 90% of profits. We went and asked people who knew better than us. So they said, listen, if you put up a plant there, it will destroy a habitat. That has knock-on effects. Like the lady Amrita was saying in the previous session, it has a knock-on effect. So the effect may be felt in Siberia or God knows where else. If you can, you should not put it up. It would be a bad form of industrialization and certainly not one that Tatas should be known for. It took only one board meeting. Unanimously, we all said, write off $10 million, we'll take the hit. And we explained it to our shareholders for that quarter. The results are down by 95% or whatever. And we didn't put it up. And that plant has still not come up. And I felt that it was not a rational decision. If you went by rationality, say, show me proof. Very often in all public matters, we've discussed it from yesterday morning. Prabhakar Rao spoke of it. People talked of murder cases. This case that we've just had about environment. We keep waiting for incontrovertible proof. Whether Rajiv Gandhi could have done something better or worse in the matter of the 1984 riots. We wait for incontrovertible proof. One of the key points that we make in our book is you're paid for your judgment, not for your advocacy skills and proof. And just like an army, I'm not an army guy, I know there are many army people here, but he has to make out the battle plan with imperfect information. He can't just sit back, he has to do something about it. Board of directors, club managing committees, music sabha should also do the same. And the lesson I would like to draw from the 2 examples, I've given 3 examples, is there's a place for rationality. I'm not suggesting everybody suspends his rationality, but there's a place for human emotion and intuition. Please don't discard it.
Yep, lesson well taken. So we've heard these 3 stories of decisions taken with some amount of data, some amount of intuition, but they all worked well. And then we have the story, and it's in the book, so you can read it there, that Ashima just referred to, the airline that crashed. Okay, now this one, you have to be able to guess. Which one am I talking about? No? No. Kingfisher, the king of good times, right? So it was launched with great fanfare. It actually was pretty popular with flyers and consumers. I mean, they thought it was a wonderful airline until it wasn't. And in 2012, it crashed. And I know people, for instance, who were employed by that airline and you know, they were distraught. They weren't being paid their salaries. They didn't know what they were going to do. And there were media reports and conversations saying, but there was a senior management, but there was a board. Why didn't anyone do anything? So what would you say to that?
I think that's a very classic example. I'm not going to go into the Kingfisher case. We are not running a case study, but I just want to refer to popularly known things, and I'll rely on that. It's a classic case where somehow directors believed that Vijay Mallya has some jadoo in his hand. वो कुछ न कुछ करके कुछ न कुछ निकाल के करा लेगा. You know, we often say this. वो उन्नारे पास छोड़ दे, हो जाएगा. We have this belief. Even in national matters, people think the Prime Minister has some formula and it will all play out well for the country, which it may not. And directors are paid for their judgment and their intuition because that judgment and intuition come out of wisdom. And judgment, intuition and wisdom come out of long and varied experience. So what a general can see about an army situation, I can't see. I may be as intelligent as he, but I can't. So what happened in the Kingfisher case? Everybody knew, they saw the signals that he's raising money, he's splashing money. I was invited for his 40th birthday, and in Bangalore Palace grounds, I saw helicopters flying, balloons. And I said, what the hell, 40th birthday, not 400th birthday? I mean, if you're a contemporary of Aurangzeb or something, I can understand celebrating it, but what the hell are you doing? But anyway, Vijay was Vijay. And then he repeated on the 50th, and then came the 60th birthday. This time it was in Goa. But 2 months before his 60th birthday, which nobody knew about, Kingfisher went down. And he said, I can't be bothering about these air hostesses' salaries. That's part of the business risk. But by the way, if you're free, come out to my 60th birthday in Goa. This time there were gnats flying. It was not just helicopters, you know. Very often, leaders lose in the court of public opinion long before the court of law. Because the court of law never comes to a conclusion. I am told only 1% of the CBI, ED cases come to fruition. If that is true, even if it's 2%, it doesn't matter. You can say it doubled. In the court of public opinion, people have an... And it was too late. And some good friend of his, who knows more than average people, tipped him off, and he now leads a luxurious lifestyle in England. So this is not to damn him or anybody, but I've asked those board members. They said, "Hey, Vijay Mallya, yaar, I mean, I'm not going to go and kuch na kuch nikalega rasta." And I have found in my experience, I have now served for 37 years as a board member in over 25 companies in 4 different countries. Cultural influence, सब कुछ थोड़ा बहुत देखा है. The one thing I've avoided is becoming a president of a club. Because I think it's easier to run Tatas than to run a club, you know. So, I found that you have to, if you keep silent at the wrong time, like Bhishma is supposed to have kept silent when Draupadi, or Karna for that matter, kept quiet at the wrong time, then you can end up in a completely unexpected situation. So that's what happened in the airline.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I don't have to name names, but surely you can see the analogies, the number of countries that have leaders who are charismatic, powerful leaders, and we just sit and say what he says is the truth, as somebody on this forum has said earlier. And we keep quiet. So you can see how easily it would happen. So lots more stories in the book. Take a look, right from allegory and from, our epics to modern day examples. So do take a look. And I think we have a few more minutes before I need to throw it out to the audience.
Can I just add a small point? Very often people have asked me, but how do you come to a conclusion to blow the whistle if something is not looking right? So in the book, I have prescribed a 15-point questionnaire, which you can apply to the club, by the way. All those who are members of Kasauli Club, please apply it. Those who are members of Delhi Gym, please do apply it. And it's a bit like Reader's Digest. Doff my cap to Rahul, who edited Reader's Digest for many years. It pays to increase your word power. And there are 15 questions. If you score 10 or 12, over 10 or 12, then your watch your back, guy. You'll get a call from ED, CBI, somebody one of these days. And then if you're below 5, you say that's human frailty. And I wanted to point that out because very often people say, how do you sense that there's trouble? And I said, you sense there's trouble if you've got a teenage son or daughter at home and he or she is behaving funnily. You don't require to go to Dr. Spock and read that book, for God's sake. You say she's coming back late, she's not behaving properly, she seems to forget, she's dropping her school exams. You use those signals to get to the bottom of it. And that's what directors should do. That's what clubs should do. But they don't. And if I go by the Financial Times, what they reported about Delhi Gymkhana is absolutely appalling. That people of such high reputation and talent could be sitting on a committee in the club and let it run the way it does run, if it is true.
Right. So if you want any more of Gopal's stories, you really will need to go get that book. But I want to ask him a personal question. Again, that's because it sort of applies to me. So Gopal said he retired some years ago, but he still seems to be really busy writing, so on and so forth. I have retirement looming on my horizon, and sometime reluctantly I will have to do it. But I did want to ask, sort of, how do you approach that, and how do you still lead a full life, particularly when your work has been such a big part of your identity? I've been this board member and so many whatever. And suddenly you're just Mr. Gopalkrishnan. How do you deal with all of that?
You know, honestly, I think you have to, each person does it in his own way. I don't have a prescription. But I remember two things that influenced my thinking. One was my former chairman. I was a little puppy, I was a trainee. And Prakash Tandon was retiring chairman of Hindustan Lever. I got to know him later on in the years. And in some context, he told me, Gopal, we all have a date expiry in our bottle. It's marked on the bottle. Once you've retired, don't ever enter back the office. If you've seen Mr. Schmidt, that Hollywood movie, you'll see how it plays out. It's a sad sort of thing. If you're invited for a cup of coffee or for lunch or dinner by the chairman or somebody and you need to go, go. Otherwise, stay away. So that's one thing. For me, it was a clean cut. There was no partial cut, staying on as emeritus, staying on as advisor. You know, there are all these trappings. The second thing is my father. I mean, we are a sort of small village, middle-class family from Tanjore. And we are a priestly family, so my father inherited all these Vedic books from his father. And when he retired from a corporate life, he showed me all those books. He said, son, don't make the mistake I made. I said, what is that? He said, when I was 45, 50, I said, I must devote my time and attention to these Vedic books, which are a family heirloom. And when I'm 60, I will spend all my time reading these books. But now the moment I take the book, I feel sleepy. I just can't keep awake anymore. My health is not that good. Whatever you want to do, think about it before you retire so that, like, you don't catch a running train by jumping into it. You run with the train and jump in. Start running before.
That sounds like excellent advice, and I will keep it in mind. But now, I hope the audience does have some questions for Gopal. Anyone? Okay, there's a mic coming your way.
Sir, we just spoke about Kingfisher Airlines. I'll just add on this. The most successful airline in the world has been the Southwest Airlines in America. I think where any company or you take any personal life, where we go wrong is, if you want to start anything, we can answer how, we know how to do and what to do. But we fail to answer the question why we are doing it. So Southwest Airlines is a case study where Herb Keller was the founder of it. He started with the company with a question why I'm doing it, and still it is the most successful airline in the world till date. And what are your views on that? Why question?
No, I can't disagree with you. You make a rational point to which my behavior is very differential.
And I hope that's what vision statements of well-run companies are about, right?
Yes,
to
ma'am.
have a vision.
Any
as to
company
why.
who's been successful, they've answered this question, why are we doing that?
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I think we're in complete agreement on
Yes.
that. I think there was someone else. If you will pass the mic to the gentleman behind you, we will come here. So that side has had its turn, now we'll come this side now.
Gopal, this side.
There.
Gopal, great insight into the corporate. There's been an overdose of corporate governance, Gopal, which we read every day. Despite that, why do we hear of and read about these stories where there's a major trust deficit now in India, whether it is in the corporate boardrooms, management teams, startups, personal, professional relationships? Love to hear your thoughts on it.
You know, in a nutshell, you need good laws. I refer to the discussion we've had during the day today on ecology, environment, and
Pharma
even
as well, yeah.
sorry,
Pharma.
the pharma thing. In my humble view, I have no evidence for what I'm about to state. It's easier to make laws than to implement them. Our SEBI rules are fantastic. I get SEBI notices or Ministry of Company Affairs. You are the chairman of this company. 14 years ago, you didn't have a company secretary for 6 weeks between 15th October and 1st November. Show cause. But somebody else is sitting just because his name starts with A and ends with I. Nobody asks him any question. So this is the problem. Our laws are formulated very well, generally speaking, but our ability to regulate and implement them is poor. That is my... And that's why I've written this book, by the way, that if directors would see themselves to watch the action on the field rather than just intellectually connect with the discussion, we'll have a better corporate governance.
Okay. So there's a gentleman behind you, Malvika, who's asking a question now. Malvika,
Sir, you have a lot of experience in the corporate world. I want to ask two questions. First relates to companies built up by their promoters from scratch, taken to the pinnacle, doing all working in what we public finds ethical ways. Suddenly they go rogue and risking jail sentences. Examples, Videocon, Yes Bank, Jet Airways. Second question I want to ask you, you have been on so many boards. How do you tackle when the promoter or the managing director or the chairman wants to do something illegal and he wants your endorsement? How do the board tackle it?
So the first one is your observation, and I will not comment on it because you made an observation and there's no question attached to that. I will answer your second one, which is framed as a question. In the book, I've given the example of CG Power. It's a Gautam Thapar company, you know. I don't know how many of you are familiar with CG Power. He's the chairman of the company. His group holds the majority shareholding. And he was accorded the due respect or whatever promoters are supposed to get. It was built up by his ancestors or his previous generations. A very alert audit committee, and this is where boards come in. They must look at behavior. A very alert audit committee found that the EBITDA, which means it's a measure of profit for those who are not business orientated, the EBITDA is rising, but the cash is decreasing. So they said, this defies the laws of gravity. How can your profit increase and your cash decrease? And then they started finding the CEO, the CFO giving apparently rational explanations, but to a completely nonsense to logic. They sat till 3 a.m. in the morning. They said, we are not going home till we get the answers. And then they suddenly found there's a huge web of companies, cash getting transferred. And do you know what happened? The audit committee came back, shaved and showered, and at 10 o'clock in the morning rang up SEBI and blew the whistle on the company themselves and asked for the chairman not to be in the board. So it's possible to remove promoters. I'm not saying you should do this to all promoters, but when you've got pretty strong evidence, you can. And well, Gautam Thapa's story is known in the public domain. But the company was saved. The work and the job of, I don't know how many thousand people, the customers. So I think it's possible. And that's the reason why I've said you'd hire a director not for his skill, but for his attitude and his judgment. We fail that. We think anybody who's retired from some nice place, he should become a director. Yes, if he's got the judgment to bring to the party, yes.
Thank you for such an enlightening session, really, Gopal and Serena. My question is this 15-point checklist for board members that you have carried in your book, is it still relevant when in this day and age it is often believed that the ED, CBI, IT, get involved for not absolutely kosher reasons? So would you say that in this scenario, you can give a checklist when other factors often come into play?
This checklist used to be used before those guys come. I mean, if they come because they have some grouse against your promoter or chairman, that's a separate matter. It sort of jumped into the political space. But assuming there is no such thing, then, by the way, I have applied that test for the last, not all 37 years of my board membership, but at least 15 years. And it is a raw instrument, but it's robust. As the Punjabis would say, hatta katta hai, but you get the hang of it. And if you do this, then you prevent an ED and CBI coming to you. Just like it happened with Tata Finance, when Ratan Tata blew the whistle on his own company. Just like it happened in CG Power, when the independent audit directors blew the whistle and fired the chairman. People say, how can I tell? I mean, it's his company. It's not his company. I always argue, a public listed company is not his company. And just as an aside, I was once invited to a debate in Calcutta where I was arguing the case that governance is very important or succession planning. And the other side was a family-run business. I'm very much against this concept of a promoter. India is the only country in the world which has this concept of a promoter. This concept doesn't exist anywhere else. Majority shareholder, yes. So promoter somehow thinks, like if you keep on saying you're the father and mother, you promoted this child, when the child is 50, they will still be after him or her, trying to control his life. So in that debate, that guy said, my son is now 18, he's going to go to Harvard, Wharton, he'll come back, he'll be 25, and he'll take over from me. As though it's when my turn came, I said, sir, with due respect, if I was a shareholder of your company, I'll fight you fiercely. So we had our difference of opinion. So I think the important thing is that it is possible, and directors, whether they use this 15-point formula or some other formula, must. This is an attempt to improve their judgment a little bit.
Okay, one last question Ashima is allowing me. One last one. Anybody has a question? I think I can see a hand there. Will someone get a mic across, please? And that's the last one.
So you gave example of the success of wheel. You had surf was challenged by Nirma, then you brought the wheel. But is it something great to celebrate when we know that the Indian markets are not very competitive? It's not a very competitive market. What are your comments on this? Thank you.
I don't agree with you. Come and
Please give reasons.
Come and work in the Indian market and find out. Especially
Yeah,
after,
I don't agree either.
And come and work in after 1991.
Absolutely.
You know how many multinationals leave India? The newspapers celebrate how many come into India. General Motors has not succeeded here. Ford has not succeeded. And now recently somebody else has also gone.
Also a different answer. For example, Coke came in and one of its objectives was to kill Thumbs Up because so that Coke would do well. Instead of which, Thumbs Up has become a really important brand because they could not ruin the brand. It was too important in India. We are competitive. Make no mistake.
We have become, huh?
You're
You're right.
We have become. You're right.
Pre-91, you were right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you for being a wonderful audience and participating so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such a lovely session. It was funny as well. We will have a very, very short tea break.